Okay, well, this is great. We're finally together outside as a group, and it's wonderful seeing you all here. So thanks a lot for coming. On behalf of the steering committee of Grassroots North Shore, we're very thrilled to have you here. Now, are you all ready to grab the future? Are you ready to get pumped up? And are you ready to make this your hobby for the next 2 months? Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is our first return to a more traditional picnic as we've had in years past, in which many of you have enjoyed since COVID hit, and we certainly hope you've enjoyed it. Okay. Now I'm just curious about something. How many of you were present for Kamala's announcement in West Dallas? Okay, show of hands. How many of you went down to see her at Fiserv? Yeah, great. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. So I think we got plenty of energy. We got tons of energy, and I think for the first time I've heard one word being said by progressives that I haven't heard before, and that's optimism. And so I think you'll bear with me. We're going to win this thing. We're going to win it. So, first off, our sincerest thanks go not only to our speakers, but to Dan Folkman, right there, for technical assistance. And God knows we need technical assistance. Recording the speakers. And so we're going to have this as a recording, which will be ready in a few days. Watch your newsletter and watch the Grassroots North Shore Facebook page. So, all of this kind of came together. All this food was, people brought lots of food, but the main encore that you all enjoyed was which involved hours of roasting and preparing turkey breasts, ham, and veggies for sandwiches, and then all the time spent assembling them. So our thanks go out to the sandwich making team with Debbie Patel, our co-chair. And our other co-chair, Cheryl Morano. Our social media maven, Elaine Stevens. Of course, Shirley Horowitz, who always makes things like this happen, okay? Okay, with us today we have several elected officials. Including Ann O'Connor, who's District Supervisor number 1. Good. Yeah. Okay. And Brian Kennedy, who would like to say a few words before we move on.
There we go. All right, I don't get to move. I don't get to walk around. I want to welcome you to the city of Glendale, and I want to remind everybody here that we have exactly 58 days to continue to have Wisconsin be a blue state, and on top of helping us remember the state for the Harris Walls ticket, we have for the first time since 2010 an opportunity to flip the state assembly and to pick up seats in the state senate. We need to be out working all around the region, helping our state assembly candidates in all these competitive districts to be able to win back the assembly, and we need to be out working for Jody Haverson again, helping her flip the 8th Senate district and helping us make progress toward winning the state senate. So I want to say I'm really out. I signed up for all of your canvassers. I hope you'll join me every weekend. We need to be out. We need to be telling our friends and neighbors, and we need to be turning this state blue all the way up and down the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Okay, we are also privileged to have with us 2 stellar candidates, along with the people that Brian has mentioned, who are going to help us take over the state legislature and get some progress going in the state. So, all right, now here to introduce our program and our speakers, please welcome the Grassroots North Shore co-chair, Debbie Patel.
Let's see if I can do this without, blowing the mic system. So thank you all for being here. You definitely have the better seats because we have the sun right in our eyes. So we're glad to see you here this afternoon. You did not come to listen to me talk. So I'm just going to tell you what's in store. We have 3 excellent speakers tonight for you to listen to hear. And we start with Josh Call, who you all know is our Attorney General extraordinaire. And he's going to say a few words, and then he's going to take off because for some reason he feels like he'd like to put his children to bed this evening. And he has to get back to Madison. And then next will be Kathy Schluter, and I'm really interested to hear what Kathy has to say. She has expertise in the area of white Christian nationalism, and I love listening to faith leaders talk about the role of religion in our world today. And then our last speaker, I'm looking forward to, is Joe Zapecki, who knows about everything about politics in Wisconsin. So I'm going to stop so that you can hear the people that you came to hear. Here's Josh.
I'm gonna live dangerously here. I think I'm gonna be okay here. But I want to come in front a little bit to see everybody. So first, you know it's election season when you're a parent like I am because your kids start talking to you about what's going on in the races. My 7-year-old was playing with Legos the other day, and he took a break and looked at me directly and said, "Dad, do we have a secure border?" I was not a question I was expecting from my 7-year-old, but you have a sense of what's been on the TV recently. So first, it's great to be back here at Grassroots North Shore. This is such a great organization. It is so good to see so many people engaged in your community. And what I love about this group is all of the conversation is always about how you're working to get more people engaged. I had a conversation earlier about getting folks registered to vote. And it's really a great thing for our state to have people who are so engaged in getting folks engaged in the political process. I want to specifically mention, I know all sorts of work from Keith and Debbie and others goes into planning this, but Shirley Horwitz, I can tell you, puts an incredible amount of time and effort into making sure the program works perfectly. So Shirley, if we could, wherever you went, if we need a round of applause. And also, there are a lot of great candidates. I do want to highlight just briefly a couple really important races. I know that Judge Crawford had to leave a few moments ago, but that is going to be a critical race, and it's not top of mind for anybody right now, but it's going to need to be soon because the majority on the state Supreme Court is going to come down to that race. Judge Crawford has an outstanding progressive record. She's going to be an outstanding justice. She's running against somebody who I know a little bit about running against, Brad Schimel, the former attorney general who managed to only get 9 sexual assault kits tested in 2 years, his first 2 years in office, who wants to see Roe v. Wade overturned, who tried to overturn the Affordable Care Act. That's who we've got on the other side in that race. So I encourage you to take a look at Susan's campaign. Jody Haber-Sinekin, who is running in one of the critical Senate districts that's going to help us between this cycle and next cycle, take back the majority in the state Senate, is right here. So we need to make sure that we're getting behind her race. We've got less than 2 months to go. So a lot of exciting races to get behind. So my mom's parents were both public school teachers in Fond du Lac. My grandpa taught social studies and history. In high school, my grandma taught middle school math. And I'm going to, I think, do them an honor today because I've got some history I want to talk about and also some math. So first, you all came to hear about math, I know, so it's exciting. But first, to take you back a little bit, when I first announced I was running for Attorney General, it was 2017. And at the time, Wisconsin had a Republican governor, Scott Walker. We had a Republican AG, Brad Schimel. We had had more than a decade of Republicans in the AG's office. We had a conservative majority on the state Supreme Court, and Donald Trump was serving as president, having just won in the state of Wisconsin. So that was about 7 years ago now. And in those 7 years, it's amazing to think about what we all have accomplished in moving the state forward. We're now in the second term of Governor Evers' time leading the state. I am proud to be in my second term as Attorney General. We have a state Supreme Court with a progressive majority. Joe Biden is in the White House. And for the first time in over a decade, we have a chance to flip the state legislature. Now, the elections we've won have been important because of who's been in office, but it has also led to real progress in this state. And there are so many issues we could talk about, but just to give you a couple examples, when we had Roe overturned, in some states we had AGs, and this happened in Texas, for example, who threatened providers, who worked to make abortion less accessible in their state. Here, 4 days after Roe was overturned, we filed suit. We have now gotten an order from a Dane County Circuit Court holding that the 1849 law we all know about does not apply in cases of abortion. And now access has been restored in Wisconsin. The fight isn't over. It's still going before our state Supreme Court, but we won that fight because of those election results. We've also been serious about holding Big Pharma accountable for its role in the opioid epidemic. I sued Purdue Pharma months after I took office. We joined investigations into opioid distributors, and we've now recovered about $750 million, $750 million to help fight the opioid epidemic. We're serious about holding polluters accountable again in Wisconsin as well. When companies pollute our waters, I have this radical view that they should clean it up and that they should pay for it, not taxpayers. We've been making that a reality in Wisconsin now for almost 15 years. But the big obstacle we have had is the state legislature. We all know how gerrymandered those maps have been. And for the first time in a long time, we have a real opportunity in this year's elections. And we are on quite a streak. You know, there's a bit of a mystique behind Robin Voss. But let's talk about his record. I talked about what's happened. But when he became speaker, all those majorities the Republicans had were in place. They've lost the governorship. They've lost the AG's office. They've lost the state Supreme Court. But we have a chance to deliver one more defeat to Robin Voss and end his time as speaker by flipping the assembly in this election. So we got to work together. We've got to flip the assembly majority. And we can take the first of two critical steps to flip the majority in the state Senate as well by picking up races like the 8th Senate District and like other swing districts in this state. So we've got a real opportunity here in the state. We also have a critical opportunity. I just, by the way, recognize Judge Crawford is in the back there. I thought she had left. But please get behind her campaign and support it. We've also got a critical U.S. Senate race that you all know about. In Tammy Baldwin, we have somebody who knows our state. She has been all over Wisconsin. Almost everybody here, I bet, has probably interacted with Tammy on one occasion or another because she is about listening to people in that state and taking action. And she has made so much progress, getting the Respect for Marriage Act passed to protect same-sex marriage, fighting to expand access to affordable health insurance coverage, leading the fight in Congress to get federal protection for reproductive freedoms. And on the other side of that race, we've got Eric Hovde, who I think has spent more time thinking about the beach than he has about Wisconsin values, who talked about overturning the ACA, who talked about overturning Roe v. Wade, and who just the other day joined Donald Trump and is ready to be a loyal soldier on behalf of the Trump agenda. So that race is a critical one. We've got a great candidate, and we've got to win it. But the one I wanted to say a few words about, I know you're going to hear about Project 2025 in a minute, is the presidential race. I think that this is the most important election of any of our lifetimes. The stakes in the presidential race really could not be clearer. I just want to make a few points about how significant the differences are. You know, as your Attorney General, I spend a lot of time thinking about public safety. And when it comes to public safety, in Kamala Harris, we've got somebody who was a prosecutor in one of the largest counties in the country who prosecuted dangerous, violent offenders. We've got somebody who was the Attorney General of the biggest state in the country, who worked to hold those who commit mortgage fraud accountable for their work. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, was in Milwaukee a few weeks ago. I don't know if any of you saw the news coverage on this, but in talking about public safety issues, he referred the reporters to the movie The Gangs of New York. That's what he is citing in behalf of his argument and his platform. So on the one hand, we've got a former prosecutor. And on the other hand, we've got a guy who's seen Gangs of New York and another guy who's seen Silence of the Lambs and can't stop talking about it. This is not a tough choice. And I will say, if there's one movie that comes to mind when I think of Donald Trump, it's actually a Jim Carrey movie. It's called Liar, Liar. But the stakes when it comes to competency could not be clearer. And it's true on issue after issue. And then look at their values. Again, I know you're going to hear about Project 2025, but I do want to say a story about Kamala Harris from my own experience interacting with her. We all knew that Roe was likely to be overturned in the Dobbs decision. You may remember there was a leak of the draft Supreme Court opinion. Well, as vice president, she used her authority to convene AGs, Democratic AGs, including me and others. Some of us met in her office in D.C., others appeared by Zoom, and we talked about what was going to happen if Roe was overturned. She wanted to bring people together because she wanted to help, and she wanted to know what we were doing and what was happening. And so we talked about what was going on in our states. We talked about the challenges that we faced, and we talked about how important it was for somebody like her to talk about the stories that were going to be happening around the country if a ban went back into effect in states all over the place. And she didn't just convene people, she acted on that, because the last few years, she has been leading the efforts in the White House to communicate around the country about reproductive freedom and the stakes because of what has happened under Donald Trump's appointees to the Supreme Court. That's one example of her commitment to fighting for our freedoms. But she also wants to strengthen our middle class. She wants to grow the economy. She wants to protect and expand access to affordable health insurance coverage. And the Republican Project 2025 agenda, it could just as easily be called Project 1825. I mean, these are really retrograde ideas. Slashing Social Security, slashing Medicare and Medicaid, eliminating the Department of Education, defining life as beginning at conception, which would mean abortion is murder. Redefining LGBTQ rights in a way that would shrink the rights of our fellow Americans. And look, Trump has been trying to walk away from Project 2025. The biggest scandal, and he's had a lot of them for him, has been writing down his agenda on paper. But you don't put together a 900-page document laying out your plans just to have it sit idle on a shelf after the election. This is the Republican playbook for this election, and we need to make sure that our fellow Wisconsinites know about it. And then last, when it comes to the presidential race, let me just say, I had the privilege of attending the DNC convention. And one of the speeches I was most impacted by was a speech by Hillary Clinton. I think a lot of us have tried to put the 2016 election out of our minds, but hearing her speak and talk about the history of women running for president in the United States really brought back, for me, a flood of memories from 2016. I remember, and some of you may remember this as well, seeing viral videos of people going to Susan B. Anthony's gravestone and putting "I voted" stickers on her grave in 2016, when we thought we were about to elect the first woman to serve as president of the United States. We all remember that feeling of having your legs cut out from under you when those election results starting to roll in. And we've really been under the pall of Donald Trump since then. Even with him out of office, he is really leading the Republican Party and shaping the way that our politics goes. Well, in this election, we have a chance to fundamentally right that wrong. We have a chance to show little girls across this country that equality of opportunity isn't just something we talk about, it's something we need, even in our highest office in the land. And I'm the father of 2 boys. Let's be clear. We all benefit when equality of opportunity is a reality for all of us. Just like we all benefit when we stand up against hate speech against members of the transgender community. All of us are less likely to be victims of hate speech. When we fight for racial equality, all of us benefit from living in a world that is more just and more equitable. When we stand by the fundamental principles of our Constitution, all of us benefit from living in a stronger country. So the stakes in this election are enormous. And here's where the math lesson comes in. In 2018, I won my 0.65 percentage points, 17,190 votes. And I'm not here to brag, but I doubled that margin in 2022. 1.33 percentage points. Thank you to everybody who helped me that. But if you take 100 people and you knock on 100 doors between now and Election Day, it's just a couple packets, by the way. That's 10,000 people you can talk to right there. It was just a small group of people. Now, magnify that across the state of Wisconsin, across groups like Grassroots North Shore, maybe knock a couple extra packets. You know, there are a lot of states in the country where you could be involved in all sorts of elections and never feel like you're making a big difference. But that is not the case in Wisconsin. We win by close margins when we win. 4 of our last 6 presidential races were decided by less than 1 percentage point. And this one is likely to be another close race. So what I want to encourage all of you to do is to get out there and think about those numbers, because you can really shape the direction of this country in the most important election in our lifetimes. I do want to say, I told Shirley I would talk a little bit about election protection just briefly. Let's be very clear. Republicans tried to overturn the results in 2020. I am proud that my administration defended against those efforts, and we won every single one of those cases because Joe Biden won the presidential election. And if they try to attack our results again, we are actually in better shape in Wisconsin now than we were then, because now we have a progressive majority on the state Supreme Court. So we're going to make clear that if you intimidate voters, you need to expect to spend time behind bars. If you threaten our election officials, you need to expect to be held accountable. And when Donald Trump tries to overturn the results again, and since he tried to overturn the Emmy results and every election he's ever lost, I think we can count on him coming again. I can tell you right now, I have every confidence that we are going to win in the courts again. He's going to fight for it in Congress, but I am confident that people are going to keep coming together. They're going to keep standing up for our rights. What we need to do is make sure we get to the point where Donald Trump is behind after Election Day. That comes from knocking on doors. It comes from calling your friends and your neighbors and talking about them. So are you all ready to fight for our democracy in this election? Are you ready to send Donald Trump to another defeat in this election? Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tammy Bragwin and Democrats up and down the ticket in this election? And let's make sure men win in this election, and let's keep moving this country forward. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Josh. You can go home to your kids now. He taught us that we have to stand up front. So thank you very much. I'm really excited to introduce the next speaker. Part of the reason I was so excited to hear Kathy speak is that I come from a mixed religion family. My father was the son of the head of the American Baptist Church of Illinois, and he married a searching agnostic. It was quite the match. Sundays were spent going to whatever church they could both survive in at the time, and they would debate in the car, and then we'd go home and have dinner. So it taught me that there are religious differences and we should be able to live together. I married not only an immigrant, but I certainly married outside of my faith. My husband is a Zoroastrian, which is a dying religion, because they don't allow conversion and they educate their young. And so their young leave and marry outside of their faith. So I'm astounded at the way we treat people of other religions, because to me, it's always been a matter of course. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say about white Christian nationalism as maybe revealed in Project 2025. I'm going to turn the mic over. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Shirley for inviting me to speak to you today about white Christian nationalism. I work with the social justice group MICA, and we began a campaign last August called We All Belong. The We All Belong campaign has 3 goals: to protect democracy, to reject white Christian nationalism, and to build the beloved community. We see white Christian nationalism as an existential threat to our democratic government, our constitutional rights, and our pluralistic and free society. It has already begun to infect our government and institutions. But if Donald Trump wins in November, the Heritage Foundation, along with over 100 other organizations, has developed Project 2025, Presidential Transition Project, which includes a 900-page blueprint for how he can destroy our democracy and create a dystopian white Christian nationalist society. Even if he loses, white Christian nationalism will continue to be a force to be reckoned with and will find a new champion. Therefore, it is essential that we understand what white Christian nationalism is, why people are attracted to it, what it would mean for our country, and how we can counter it. So first, what is white Christian nationalism? White Christian nationalism is a political ideology and cultural framework that believes the U.S. is God's chosen nation, and certain conservative white Christians, typically those descended from the original Northern European settlers, are the only true Americans. These true Americans are ordained by God to rule this nation and all of us, and would enjoy a higher political, economic, and social status. Their ultimate goal is power and privilege. White Christian nationalism would replace our democracy with a theocracy and eliminate the separation of church and state found in the Constitution. They would counter the growing multiculturalism and liberalism in our society by deporting immigrants, subjugating women, and marginalizing and disenfranchising racial and ethnic minorities and LGBTQ persons. They would seek to control what they call the 7 pillars of society: government, business, religion, family, education, media, and entertainment and the arts. They believe this will make America great again. In other words, like it was before the civil rights when white elites were in charge. Almost half of Republicans either identify or sympathize with Christian nationalist ideas. They believe in American exceptionalism and manifest destiny, and the myth that America was founded as a Christian nation. They feel entitled and even called to suppress and discriminate against the rights of people who are not like them. Many are willing to defame, intimidate, and use violence to defeat those who oppose them, as shown by the January 6th insurrection and the increase in hate crimes. They want their leader to be an attack dog who will stop at nothing to advance their agenda. One commentator has described their worldview as, and I quote, a version of Christian doctrine that pits individuals against each other in a zero-sum race for survival, where the winner takes all and success is a mark of God's approval, no matter how it is achieved. Being on edge and ready to strike is not a cruelty, but a necessity in this worldview. The view that God has graced America with a cunning Donald Trump is the walking manifestation of this vision. The fact that Donald Trump has achieved wealth and power through coercion and corruption is a testament to the fact that God has graced him with the cunning necessary to win in a brutal world, end quote. They also appear to believe that misogyny and cruel sexual jokes are signs of masculine strength. So what we would see as shocking and disgusting, they see as toughness and divine providence. I should note that not all Christian nationalists are white Christian men. Some are Blacks, Latinos, Asians, women, and immigrants. And not all are religious. Some see Christianity more as an ethnicity than a faith. And let me be clear, being a conservative does not make someone a white Christian nationalist. There is nothing wrong with having conservative views. It is when they feel entitled to shove their views down everyone else's throats that it becomes a problem. Now, white Christian nationalism is not new. It has its roots in the white supremacy of the 1600s, where it has been referred to as America's original sin. This belief in white supremacy justified slave ownership and the segregation, discrimination, and violence of the Jim Crow era, and is reflected in the systemic racism that continues to this day. This oppression was alive and well until the country reversed course with Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 and the Civil Rights Laws in 1964. White Christian nationalism also has roots in fascism, which gained a foothold in our country in the 1930s. Fascism is a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalistic political ideology characterized by a dictatorial leader, a belief in a natural social hierarchy, and a regimented society. This movement was led by wealthy industrialists, but failed with the election of FDR and the start of World War II. Unfortunately, these ideologies did not disappear. They just went underground. A white supremacist fascist ideology reemerged as white Christian nationalism due to a combination of forces. First, the Republican Party began adopting conservative and racially slanted social policies in the 1960s as part of its Southern strategy to attract white Southern voters. The conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and other conservative foundations began developing conservative strategies and messaging. Think welfare queen, super predator, right to life, death tax. Then in 1976, the tax-exempt status of Bob Jones University was revoked for its racist policies. This was a wake-up call for conservative Christians. They looked for an issue to galvanize the religious right and landed on abortion, even though I must say the Bible never mentions abortion nor treats fetuses as living persons. Conservative televangelist Jerry Falwell formed the Moral Majority in 1979 that crusaded against the advancement of the women's liberation, legalized abortion, gay rights, and the civil rights movements. He led the Christian right into politics and found a home with the Republican Party. This new religious right coalition used the candidacy of Ronald Reagan in 1980 to advance their vision for a white patriarchy to retain power in America. As the demographics of the country changed, a fear of multiculturalism and later immigration further fueled the Christian right movement. Their support helped elect George Bush in 2000 and 2004 and Donald Trump in 2016. It was Donald Trump, though, who gave white Christian nationalism legitimacy. He identified with and courted white Christian nationalists. You may recall that when a white Christian nationalist ran down a protester in Charlottesville, Trump defended white Christian nationalists as good people. After he was elected, he rewarded his supporters by packing the Supreme Court with conservative judges and starting to build the wall. When he lost the election in 2020, white Christian nationalists led the January 6th insurrection, carrying crosses and Christian signs. White Christian nationalism had some victories, notably the reversal of Roe v. Wade and in state and local government. But the defeat of Trump in 2020 showed that their views did not have the support of the majority of Americans. Unable to guarantee victory in a fair election, white Christian nationalists have given up on liberal democracy and embraced Hungary's strongman Viktor Orban and his illiberal democracy, which is essentially an autocracy dressed up as a democracy and cloaked in religion. Also one in which the same guy always wins. So who are white Christian nationalists and what motivates them? Well, there are four groups. First, there are politicians. Of course, they're motivated by power. They talk about admiring and being dictators, fixing the system so no one needs to vote again, and retribution against their enemies. The Supreme Court has amplified this power by granting the president sweeping immunities for anything done as part of an official act while in office, which some believe could even include the assassination of opponents and the selling of state secrets. The second are wealthy elites. They want lower taxes and fewer regulations to secure and increase their wealth, somewhat like the oligarchs in Russia. And third are the religious right, evangelicals who condemn the godless socialism of Democrats, who they call demons and pedophiles. Godless socialism includes all the liberal policies they don't like, such as abortion and gay rights, pluralism and immigration, and welfare and DEI. And then lastly, average people, mostly white men, often rural and less educated, who feel left out or left behind and are looking for purpose and belonging. This group is easily manipulated through fear and anger. So what are the tactics of white Christian nationalism? Well, there are many. First, they apply the theory of originalism to the Constitution to shift key issues to the states where they have more power and can enact their extremist agendas. They would ban all abortion in the name of the right to life and saving babies. This has resulted in draconian state abortion laws that deny women the right to make life choices for themselves or even receive medical treatment for life-threatening complications during their pregnancies. They would promote universal gun ownership while saying that mass shootings are just a fact of life that we have to get over, and ignoring the fact that guns have become the leading killer of children and youth. They create dog whistles, such as critical race theory or claims that homosexuality is being taught in kindergarten, under the guise of protecting children, and then using them to justify banning books in Black history curricula and requiring the teaching of the Bible, school prayer, and the display of the Ten Commandments in public schools. They suppress or discourage minority voters. They blame mail-in ballots, drop boxes, and voting by illegal immigrants for election losses. So to prevent this election fraud, they promote gerrymandering, onerous registration requirements like proof of citizenship, disqualifying voters on technicalities, closing polling places, and granting electors the right to reject election results. They downplay racism. Racism is over, but Blacks are just lazy, immoral, and dangerous. Most Muslims are terrorists, and Jews are a cabal that secretly controls the country. Plus, they have space lasers. The result has been the elimination of DEI and other equity-based programs, the loss of opportunity for minorities, and hate crimes against Muslims, Jews, Asians, and LGBTQ persons. They label public improvements and social programs as communism, socialism, and Marxism. Taxes used to pay for them as a redistribution of wealth from the makers to the takers, and any attempt to regulate business as an assault on the liberty of wealthy businessmen. This mindset has fueled the steady erosion of social programs, healthcare, education, and affordable housing for minority communities for years. They rationalize climate change. Despite record heat waves and dramatic increases in destructive storms, forest fires, and floods, they deny or ignore climate change. The fact that CO2 levels are the highest they have ever been is simply due to natural cyclical weather patterns. Their policy is to drill, baby, drill, and oppose the development of alternative energy sources. They scapegoat immigrants as criminals and rapists who are poisoning the blood of our nation and are part of a great replacement conspiracy. Instead of supporting legislation to address immigration, they build a wall, imprison immigrants in detention centers, and separate parents from their children, some of whom have never been reunited. They foment fear and anger. They rant that America is in decline, our economy is in ruins, crime is rampant, and they are being invaded by immigrant thugs. As Trump has said, all we have to do is define our opponent as being a communist or a socialist or somebody that's going to destroy our country. And finally, they use Hitler's playbook of misrepresentation, outright lies, bullying, power politics, and violence to take control and consolidate power. They know that when people can no longer recognize the truth, they are more likely to turn to a strong leader to define it for them, and then blindly follow him to thwart the dangers he tells them are closing in. But the white Christian nationalists are not done. They want complete control, and that is where Project 2025 comes in. Project 2025, Mandate for Leadership, is a manifesto of the white Christian nationalist ideology and a playbook for imposing it on all Americans. Despite Trump's efforts to distance himself from the project, 31 of the 38 drafters were connected to his administration, and Trump is mentioned over 300 times in the document. A key drafter has also said privately that Trump fully supports the project. Now, here's just a snapshot of the changes recommended by Project 2025. First, take control of the government. We classify most government employees as political appointees and fire or replace them with Trump loyalists. Pack the courts with MAGA judges. Deploy the military to stop domestic protests. End the independence of the Departments of Justice and Defense, and dismantle the FBI and Homeland Security. If they achieve only this, who is left to oppose them? They would create an economy that favors the rich, They would reduce taxes of the top 1% in corporations and reduce regulations on big business and oil. They would eliminate unions and enable employers to cut overtime pay, relax worker safety rules, and allow workplace discrimination. They would control education to indoctrinate and discriminate. They would eliminate the Department of Education and use taxpayer-funded vouchers to pay for private religious schools while cutting funding to public schools. They would encourage religious indoctrination in public schools while limiting education and books about slavery, racism, and LGBTQ. They would exempt students in private schools from military service while requiring students in public schools to take a military entrance exam. Then they would reduce or eliminate social safety nets. They would repeal the Affordable Care Act, reduce Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They'd reduce federal funding for food assistance and housing and eliminate Head Start and free and discounted school lunch. They dismantle civil rights and DEI protections and promote and expedite capital punishment. They would restrict the rights of women and LGBTQ. They would enact a nationwide abortion ban, regardless of the viability of the fetus or the health of the mother, ban contraceptives, and monitor pregnant women. They would end no-fault divorce so women cannot escape a bad or abusive marriage. And they would end the treatment of same-sex unions as marriage. Then they would eliminate immigration and citizenship. They would deport 10 million immigrants or detain them in camps. They would limit legal immigration to the best and the brightest and ban Muslims from entering the country. And they would end birthright citizenship. On the environment, they would expand drilling for oil and natural gas, including the Arctic and public lands, and reduce protections for endangered species. And in foreign policy, they would limit support for NATO and Ukraine. So who loses? Well, almost everyone. Women, children, workers, poor, ethnic and religious minorities, immigrants, LGBTQ persons, democracy, European allies, and the environment. So what can we do to counter white Christian nationalism? Ultimately, we must decide the future direction of our country at the polls. We must vote our values and value our vote. But long term, we must win hearts and minds. Some hardcore believers will not listen, but others will. That comes down to messaging, moral leadership, and one-on-one conversations. First, we must understand that political views are based on frames. Frames are subconscious mental shortcuts that organize and give meaning to events and information. Frames shape our behaviors, worldview, and politics. Frames may not be true, but they are true for the individual. We may hold inconsistent frames, such as our political and religious views, but when the two compete, one frame becomes dominant. Frames are based on fundamental beliefs, values, and identity, such as family, God, and strangers. Do we see family as a patriarchy ruled by a strong disciplinarian father who demands self-reliance, or one led by both father and mother who teach compassion and social responsibility? Is our God angry, vindictive, and distant, or a loving, caring father? Do we have a scarcity mindset that sees strangers as threats or competition, or an abundance mindset that sees them as assets and neighbors? Frames are triggered by messaging and are embedded by repeated messaging. They are reinforced by a tendency called confirmation bias to only seek information that supports the frame and dismisses or rationalizes away contradictory facts. Effective messaging is based on how others think and form opinions. It must be aspirational and visionary and create an emotional response, often through personal stories and metaphors. Think MLK's "I Have a Dream" versus Nixon, "I am not a crook." We can see that type of messaging in the Democrats' focus on joy and a way forward and the slogan, "We shall not go back," as well as Republicans' theme of "Make America Great Again." The good news is that frames can be changed over time. We will not change frames with facts, but we can reframe them with good messaging of our own. Another way is to pressure our churches, be they Christian or other faiths, to be moral leaders. They should speak out about the many ways white Christian nationalism does not reflect the gospel of Jesus or other faith traditions, rather than allow white Christian nationalists to control the religious narrative. Unfortunately, instead of taking a moral stand, many churches have stayed silent out of fear of losing parishioners. Churches also need to practice what they preach. Today, too many view churches as clubby and hypocritical, so their ability to be moral leaders has been compromised. And finally, we must have personal conversations with people who are not locked into the white Christian nationalist frame. It is important that we first listen and connect with common values, show empathy and humility, admit we do not have all the answers, and most difficult, control our emotions. We must focus on what we believe versus condemn what they believe, and use messaging that creates an alternative frame. For example, we can say, I share your concern for children, or I am concerned also about crime, but I think there is another way to see this, versus, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. What is wrong with you? We can also ask probing questions. Why do you think that? Or how do you think someone who has been harmed by, let's say, gun violence or climate change would react to your view? And use your language, not theirs. Fetuses versus babies, tax benefit versus tax burden, community building versus socialism. And finally, remember that change is incremental, so your goal should be to just move them to the next level. In conclusion, white Christian nationalism has always been with us and will probably always be with us in some form. But it is bad government and bad religion and brings out the worst in us. It would end the liberal democracy and free and diverse society that we cherish. The good news is that most Americans do not want this future, but it will be up to people like us to fight for the future we want. That means that we must learn to mount a strong defense to the white Christian nationalist ideology and to offer a better vision of America in which all of us feel included and valued and can prosper and pursue happiness and fulfillment in the way we choose. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you so much. It gave us all a lot to think about, and it wasn't all pleasant, what we were thinking about. But somewhere in your words, Kathy, I flipped from being like, oh my God, things are bad, to saying, what a time to be alive and live in Wisconsin, because everything that we do will make a difference, right? So anyway, so that's what we have to think about. And there's nobody better to end with our speeches tonight but Joe Zepecki. He's much in demand as a manager. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Joe.
Before I get going, an observation. As you all have been looking at us, we've been looking at you, and I noticed something. Look to your left, look to your right. What do you notice? There are maybe 2 people here younger than me. So why in the world are you listening to some punk kid to close a program where you learned a lot and you heard from the duly elected Attorney General of the great state of Wisconsin? I don't know, but here's why. Here's why I think. Because in 1996, I volunteered on my first campaign. I'll bet some of you remember Jerry Kletchka. 96 was a re-election year for Jerry Kletchka. As a 14-year-old, I said, this is how I want to spend my summer. Putting together yard signs, putting them in people's yards, answering the phone, and doing everything I can to make a difference. And since then, I have worked on more than 100 campaigns in about half the states in this country, including 3 presidentials on the campaign side, 2 on the crazy dark money side. I've got some miles on these types. But I'm not just a political hack. And I'm something else that is suddenly a lot more popular among audiences like this. Tim Walz and I have something in common. we're both football coaches. I'm in my 7th year coaching high school football at the same school I played at in the 1900s, is how the kids put it. So if I come across not quite like a soaring rhetoric political guy tonight, and it sounds more like a pep talk or more like a pregame speech, I'm not angry at you. I'm just in mid-season form, okay? So to get that going, I want to try something that us coaches do to make sure people are paying attention. It's a 2 claps if you're with me. Give me 2 claps if you're with me. There you go. Now we're going to go back to something that's very general Josh Call conjured up that we probably didn't like very much. Do you remember how you felt the morning after the 2016 election? If you were sad, give me 2 claps. If you were angry, give me 2 claps. There was reason to be angry. There was reason to be scared. There was reason to be sad. And if we felt that way, it turned out we felt that with good reason. Because here's what that meant. Over that 4 years that Donald Trump was in the White House, another tax cut for the wealthy. The closest we ever came to losing Obamacare. If it wasn't for a single thumbs down to John McCain, that was gone. Kids in cages. 3 Supreme Court justices. Radical Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society, Supreme Court justices. And we're going to come back to that. 1 million lives lost due to COVID because that president couldn't figure out how to run the government and respond to a once-in-a-century pandemic, which broke the economy, it broke our kids, it broke the mental health of this country. That is what we lost when we lost what I would say was the most important election of our lifetime. With apologies to Attorney General Paul, we only know if it's the most important election after it happened. We might find out that 2024 is, in fact, more important than 2016, but standing here today, I can't tell you that. 2016 was the most important election of our lifetime because look where we are today, and we can trace it right back to that night and to that fall when Hillary Clinton lost this state by just 23,000 votes. 23,000. And think of all the votes in that election that could have cut into that or made up for that. I'm going to the pad here. Forget third-party candidates. Forget Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, those guys. The people who walked into the voting booth or voted by mail and wrote in Mickey Mouse or their cousin or their brother or their sister, they won more than 23,000 of those in 2016. When you look at all of the actual third-party votes, there were 8 times the margin that decided this state. 188,000 Wisconsinites opted out. Said, we don't want this choice. We're going to go another direction. And look what it cost us. If you don't want to feel that way, give me 2 claps. Now we go to 2020. Hey, we've seen what a disaster this guy is. We're seeing our neighbors or our friends get sick and die. This should be easy, right? It wasn't. 20,000 votes was the margin of Wisconsin in 2020. There were 188,000 third-party votes, but there were still 3 times the margin. That's how close this state is. And when you do the work, and when you get over the top, and when you win, what do you need? You're a big fan of the history that was made when we had our first woman vice president. Give me 2 claps. How about the first black woman on the Supreme Court? Give me 2 claps. An infrastructure decade, 2 claps. The first meaningful gun safety reform legislation in this country in 30 years.
The Chips and Science Act.
The largest climate change bill in world history. And the most magnanimous political decision that anyone in American politics has made since George Washington. That is what your votes and your work and that narrow 20,000 vote margin makes. It meant we got Joe Biden for 4 years. We got a man who is the embodiment of serving others before himself, who was willing to make an impossible situation, and like take an impossible situation and do the right thing. We can't pick out a lot of people in American political life who would have done what Joe Biden did. And because he did it, we have an opportunity. Okay? And because we all pay attention and have seen what Trump's 4 years looked like and what the last 4 years were like, we want to believe in our heart of hearts, this is going to be easy. Kamala Harris is great, breath of fresh air. Tim Walz, look at his record in Minnesota. We wish we were Minnesota when it comes to some of what he's not done, like free lunches for every child, right? But it's not going to be easy because we are that razor's thin state. And there is too much still at stake to risk feeling like you felt the morning after the 2016 election. Okay? What's it say? How about reproductive freedom? How about making sure our daughters and our granddaughters have the same rights that our moms and grandmothers did? That's not too much to ask. How about global stability? How about making sure it's not okay for a dictator named Vladimir Putin to just roll over international boundaries in violation of the world order since the end of World War II? How about that? Right? There is so much at stake. We have to win. We have to get this right. And unfortunately, we got to try to win by more than 1 out field goal. A 23,000 loss, a 20,000 win, that's about a 3-point game. You know what happens if we win by that again? They're going to try to steal it again. So we got to hammer down for 58 days and get everybody we can. So how do we do that? My old boss, Barack Obama, says, don't boom, vote. I'm pretty sure we got all your votes. I hope so. His better half says something even better. Do something. Right? We all got to do something every single day for the next 58 days. Here's what Coach Joe says. Say it to my team. We say it every single day. Do your job. When you are coaching a football team, which is the most complicated team game there is, 11 players on a team, flying around at 1 million miles an hour, what do you got to do? You got to do your job. For the next 58 days, you all are a team and you got to do your job. Maybe it's collecting the donations. Maybe it's fundraising. Maybe it's doing relational organizing. Maybe it's working with Keith to identify captives for some of these downtown apartment buildings. Whatever your role is, that is what we need you to do. Even if it takes you outside of your comfort zone. We know what's at stake. We know how important this is, and we are desperate to do everything we can. But sometimes it's a little scary, right? I've always been better on the phones than at the doors. It's so much easier to send text messages than to go knock on people's doors. Get outside your comfort zone. And let me tell you why I know you can do it. If Liz freaking Cheney can do it, if Dick Cheney can do it, if they can get outside of their comfort zone because of what's at stake, I know that you can't. Right? And you have, whether it's doors, phones, texts, you have more opportunity than we've had in election years. My goodness. There are so many targets out there that we can go get. Okay? Because the two worst things that ever happened to Donald Trump politically happened after we beat him last time. January 6th and the Dobbs decision that was delivered by those 3 Supreme Court justices he appointed were the 2 biggest L's for him politically than anything else that ever happened after he lost. Okay? Why is it so close? I wish I knew. It's because it's a divided country, right? This should be easy, but it's not. But what those 2 events mean is you have more Republicans, or people who think they were Republicans, or people who say they're independents, but really they're Republicans, they just don't like labels, or like feeling like they're part of a team. You can get those people in a way that we have never been able to before. Okay? But one really good thing happened to Donald Trump that might explain why it's so difficult. After January 6th, he got benched. He was out of our lives. He wasn't in our living room, our social media feeds every day. He was banned and he was banished from Mar-a-Lago, and he's been swimming every single day in the right-wing magosphere, but he has been virtually invisible to the people who are ultimately going to decide this election. And that is going to change too, starting Tuesday night. If you think Kamala Harris, give it to him, give me 2 claps. Right? That's going to change over the next 58 days. People are going to see him and be reminded anew of why they didn't like him in the first place. They're going to be reminded of those 2 terrible things that have created more opportunity for us than we have had in a very long time. So over these next 57 days, today's over, it's 158. We got to take advantage. And by the way, it's not 57 days because here in Wisconsin, the mail ballots go out in about 2 weeks. Early voting starts in about 40 days. There's no more time to go, I'll get to it next week. Now is the time. If you understand that, give me 2 claps. So what we are going to do over these 57 days is seize that opportunity that has been presented to us. Okay? I'm not going to tell you that Kamala Harris is perfect or that Tim Harris, but they're all perfect. They are not perfect. It is not our job to worship them. That's the other team that does the worship stuff. Right? But they are people who will defend our democracy, who will honor and understand the Constitution, and who will do right by our country. And I think you're probably going to talk with some folks in these next 57 days who might still be wavering, who might be thinking about a third party, who might be thinking about skipping that ballot line. I think there's fewer of them, but I think they might be out there. And I want you all to know the following, because the best messaging I've heard for how to talk to somebody like that came from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If you're a fan, give me 2 claps. The way that she put it is, if there are issues you carry, if there's a way you want to make this a more perfect union, it happens to be a policy position that isn't currently shared by one of the 2 major party candidates for president, or even the 2 major political parties. What she wants you to consider is this. Under what kind of circumstance do you want to organize and advocate for the change you want to see in the world? Do you think they'll have a lot of success with that advocacy under an authoritarian regime headed by a man with fewer guardrails than the last time he was president, who, by the way, suggested that the U.S. Army shoot peaceful protesters? Or do you think you will have more luck advocating for what you believe in under a presidency where the president believes in democracy, who understands the rule of law, and will hear you out even when she disagrees? I think that question answers itself if you do anything class. So that's what's at stake. That's how we win. That is the job before us for the next 57 days. That is what I have. Thank you for what you will do. Thank you for what you've already done. Thank you to Kathleen and to Attorney General Hall and to Shirley and to everybody.
who made tonight possible. And do we have questions? No time for questions.
Well, like, thank you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And thank you to the speakers. They've been awesome. I also want to give a special shout out to our volunteer coordinator extraordinaire, Norma Gilson. I'm sure many of you know her and have worked for her. Watch for a follow-up email. We will be sending out more resources, a link to the video of the speakers this evening, a special video about Project 2025, and the information on how to volunteer and get involved. I know if anybody gave my favorite statistic about how important every single thing that we can do is. But the margin of error or the margin of effort last several elections has been 2 votes per ward. It was 2 votes per ward by which Biden took Wisconsin. So, when you're out there canvassing, you might think, oh man, I'm only talking to 1 out of every 4 or 5 doors. It doesn't feel like I'm moving the needle. If you move 2 people in the amount of time that you canvass, I run canvasses out of my house every Saturday and Sunday from now until Election Day. You can be part of what really and truly makes the difference. Please visit the volunteer and membership tables on your way out if you haven't done so already. And please take sandwiches and lots of left over.